Boom, and just like that, we are caught deep within the simulation, and it's been quite some time since myself and the man of honor today have actually been on the mic and in the snake pit like this in podcast format, but I feel like we're going to pick it up very quickly. Now, Kill, do you mind if I just kind of preface the podcast as we used to do?
Go for it.
Okay, before we move on, I introduced our guest, who I just lightly introduced. Who else is in the room with us today? Who's engineering the episode? Sebastian. Zorro Jr. over there. Who we got over here? Fresh off the motherfucking boat. Welcome to the Snake Pit, brethren. Now, I was just telling our guest today, the man of honor, it's going to be quite hard for me to make this episode not about myself, because I have a hard time being selfless at points, and I love entertaining. But today it's all about you, man. And I just want to say, I do think you and I are going to reflect looking back on this recording when we're like 80 and be like, damn, we were at our pinnacle hotness at that moment. Like, take a look at this recording. You're looking handsome as hell, bro.
Yeah, we're looking good. This is a nice little boost.
No, I was just looking at the photos of you from the event, and I was like, damn, Kill's like kind of hitting his prime right now.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Now, today we're here to talk about Cillian Dunne's brand new book, Death by a Million Papercuts. And it's not necessarily brand new. When was the exact release date? And that's kind of just what we're going to discuss all day today, is Kill has poured his heart and soul into this book specifically. And he's been hustling it. He's been getting on a bunch of different podcasts. And we just want to use today as kind of just like a free-form vessel for him to talk about the book, creating the book, what the book's about. That way we can sell the book a little bit more and maybe get him some better opportunities to sell the book on a more national scale.
Yep.
That's what we're here for. So, Liam, if we lose track, you just put your hand up and say, dude, you're being a selfish motherfucker.
Yeah, I got you.
All right, thank you, man. Okay, so first off, let's just talk about when the book was released, when you started it, what it's about. Give us a quick overview.
Cool. So the book was released on October 7th, 2022. So from now, the day that we're shooting the podcast, to then, it's been about 3.5 months. The book itself, I first started writing it January 2022. So it's been a little while working on it. I essentially, to give you a backstory on the book, this is a true story. Names, dates, and places have been fictionalized, but the actual content of the book is completely true. The story itself is a Spotlight story. So if you're familiar with the movie Spotlight, after that team at the Boston Globe investigated the Catholic Church, they investigated boarding schools in New England. Now, I was put in touch with this woman who was married to this headmaster of a very, very prestigious boarding school in New England for about 30 years. And one day the FBI come knocking on her door and they tell her that there's an active investigation being built against her husband by 5 former students from 30 years prior. Now, the FBI want her to work with them against her husband without him knowing. So essentially, she has this, decision to make. Does she help them and, destroy her relationship with her husband, who she's loved for 30 years? Or does she kind of become ignorant and, not help them and keep living the life that she has been living? So, no spoilers, but she ultimately decides to help them, and she has to sleep in the same bed as, this man who's being accused of rape by 5 different students without him knowing. So the story is, it's very personal for this woman, and it's really thrilling. And at the end of the day, it's also something that I think people get a little angry reading, because it's a very true story. And in fact, the Spotlight team found that there are 67 different boarding schools in New England with at least one sexual assault allegation between a member of faculty and a student. So this story is very relevant. This report only came out 5 years ago. I only wrote the book 1 year ago, and it's been released for 3 months, and reception has been quite good so far.
I think that's going to be very interesting for a lot of people to hear, because when you think of like all the pre-scandals and the Catholic Church scandals, do you think all that should happen in the 80s? But you're saying this is like pretty recent. Yeah,
so I mean, this stuff definitely happened in the 80s. This story, part of it takes place in the 90s. So the way the story is structured is it jumps between past and present, between when the woman of the story first met her husband, who was the headmaster, and then it jumps forward to present day when the investigation is kind of really heating up. So you get to see, what actually happened in the past versus what is happening now and what is being told to her through the FBI. So it's definitely, I mean, it's still super relevant. I put, when I was doing my research, I reached out to a lot of people I know that went to boarding schools in Massachusetts. I went to Northeastern University. A lot of kids that I was friends with went to boarding schools for 4 years in a 100-mile radius, where all of these stories take place. And the things that I heard were absolutely shocking. I mean, things that are happening in like 2015, things that are definitely still happening to today. But, back in the 90s, back in the 80s, there weren't really cell phones, there was no internet. And what's really scary is, these students were being assaulted by members of faculty and really had no way of contacting their parents. They couldn't leave the schools, couldn't contact their parents. They had no internet. They didn't have phones to really, text, someone close to them at night. They were alone, and they were prey, and these members of faculty were very much predators. So
now, how did you first get in touch with the woman who told you the story?
Very interesting. So,
and sorry to cut you off. She, throughout the book, remains nameless, correct?
Yeah, totally nameless. And the reason for that being so is there are actually a lot of ongoing lawsuits involved. When you read the book, you'll understand why. Boarding schools are traditionally kind of like an old boys club. Now, I'm sure that's changing a little bit as we're kind of progressing in the 21st century, but historically speaking, very much old boys club. Especially in New England, the headmasters and the board of faculty, they all kind of know each other no matter what the school is. It's a very, very connected kind of industry. So I think, in terms of, I'm sorry, I completely went off on a tangent. What was your...
How did you first get in touch with the woman?
Yeah. So in terms of how I got in touch, they're very, very crazy. So this woman, before she even met the guy, was friends with my mom. They used to work together in a bar. And, like 4 years ago or something, they were just randomly out at a grocery store, and my mom bumped into her and was like, hey, how's life? And she's like, well, fucking terrible. And this is why. And my mom came home and she was like, Cillian, you have to write this story. Because at the time I was writing my second book, and she's like, Jesus Christ, you have to write this story. This is the craziest thing I've literally ever heard. She told me kind of like the Cliff Notes version, and it kind of sat with me for a couple of years, and then the pandemic happened, and I was just doing nothing. I was like, you know what, why don't you reach out to her and see if she'd be open to me writing the book? And sure enough, she was. So that's kind of how we got put in touch, and it was really just kind of that connection. It's not like she's my mom's best friend or anything. They just worked together 30 years ago in a bar.
And so then what was the gathering information process like for you? Sat down with her for a couple of weeks, or?
Yeah, so I was actually in Los Angeles and she was on the East Coast, and I would call her 3 times a week for 2 hours at a time, sometimes 3 hours, and I would interview her. So I would come to each session with a specific theme or specific topic in mind, and we would just sit down for 3 hours, and I would just let her talk, and I would just write notes the entire time. I would hardly jump in with any questions. I would just say, this is obviously very personal for you. This is your first time doing this. Honestly, it was my first time really sitting down with someone and kind of extracting information to build a story. So I just said, tell me everything, and I'll make note of everything, and then I'll just kind of conjure up the story and in my mind, and I'll turn it into kind of a narrative that flows like a book. And that's exactly how we did it.
How did you make her trust you initially? I feel like this would be such a crippling thing to tell people about, hey, my husband is a fucking monster.
Yeah. I ask myself that sometimes. I think it is partly because the way we kind of first started talking, we acknowledged the elephant in the room. We knew how difficult it was going to be for her. We knew how awkward it was going to be for her to tell me all this stuff. And I think the best way I thought was to do it was to just ease into it. So the first 2 sessions, we didn't even talk about sexual assault or rape or anything like that. We talked about the early days in the relationship. We talked about their children. We talked about what life is like living at a boarding school when you're not a student there, when you're a member of faculty, or if you're married to a member of faculty. So I kind of got all the necessary context for boarding school life. I understood the setting. I understood the type of people that go there. I understood kind of how the institutions work. And then by session 3 or 4, I kind of built up a level of trust, and was just like, all right, now tell me all the shitty stuff. And and then for the next 2 months, we talked about some of the worst things I've ever heard in my life. But I think in a way it was really therapeutic for her as well. It was kind of the first time she'd actually spoken about it to anyone other than a journalist at Spotlight, a member of the FBI, or a therapist. So I think it actually turned out quite well for both of us, that we really sat down and ironed all this stuff out. Obviously for her, for that therapeutic element, and for me, for, being able to write a story that was cohesive and had all of the relevant details.
Yeah, I could imagine it'd be pretty cathartic for her if she was just like bottling it in forever.
Yeah.
But what value besides that does she gain from this?
I think the way I have interpreted that is she's been living in like a hurricane of chaos for like 5 or 6 years now. And like every day has been worse than the next. Like it's almost as if like every single day a new piece of information would come out about her husband, and she would learn something that she never knew, and it would just destroy her. Like it was just like literally, that's why it's called death by a million paper cuts. It's like every single day there was something really small that would cut her. And death by a million paper cuts, when you get your millionth paper cut, like you're fucking bleeding. Like you are bleeding. And that's how this woman felt, basically right up until like last year. That's how this woman felt. Like every single day somebody was asking her a question. This guy was doing something, whether it was like reaching out to their children and not acknowledging the situation at hand, and it was really, really terrible for her. So I think the benefit of the book for her is that now the story's kind of out there. Like the story does exist, and I don't think people are judging her quite as hard as she judges herself, because it's a shitty thing. Like she was married to this guy for 30 years, and then 30 years go by and she finds out that during the early days of their relationship this guy was assaulting students. Like that's horrible. And I think a lot of people would really jump to blaming themselves first. Obviously she didn't do anything wrong, but she probably was like, how the hell did I not see any of the signs? Why did I stay married to this guy? So I think the book being like tangible and real, and people having a chance to read her story without realizing who she is and saying, wow, I feel bad for this person, I think it settles with her quite well. I think I think she finally, or at least I hope, is realizing that she could have done nothing. Her husband was a total sociopath who gaslit her and manipulated her, and not only her, but like the system as well, and students and their parents for years. So I think that's the benefit for her to have this book like be a real thing.
Now that the book's out, have any of the victims or anyone involved with the case reached out to you?
No. Nobody's reached out to me. There was one woman. I was in Boston, and there was one woman who is around my age, a couple of years older than me, who was kind of a victim at a school. Now, I say kind of because, she very much was so, but not at this school and not to the same degree. And I think she really sympathized with the material in the book, and she kind of told me some stories about what happened at her school. And long story short, essentially she was hooking up with a teacher, and the school found out, and they kicked her out of school and kept him there because it was easier for her to be kicked out of school than to get rid of a teacher and explain why they were getting rid of the teacher. So as for the actual victims kind of involved in this book, nobody's reached out to me. The victims have all had their names changed, so they probably wouldn't even realize. But other victims from other cases at other schools have taken a little bit of notice.
Why would you choose to write a book on this? Like, why would you want to just like take a deep dive on like some of the worst parts of humanity, especially if you want to be a screenwriter?
Yeah, I think I just think the story is just so relevant and so interesting that I'd be a fool not to write it. Like it really is. Like, I'm not just saying this because like I wrote a book about it, but like the actual true story is literally like probably the best story I've ever heard in my life. Like there are twists, there are turns, like the characters are, apart from like the main one, are basically all pieces of shit who are like manipulative, and they are very duplicitous. Like they show you one side, but then they act completely way on kind of on the back end. And our protagonist like really doesn't realize, like she is, she has her world built for her by her husband. She's living in like a fake reality essentially, And I just find that so goddamn interesting. But what I find most interesting about it, and it's actually a line in the book, like I just loved it so much, is like, picture it as like the husband, the house that they live in is like a glass house. He built them a glass house, and this is her reality. But then when the FBI show up and kind of reveal the truth to her, it's almost like the FBI are giving her a stone. So she has a stone and she's living in a glass house. If she wants, she could fucking hurl that stone, break the glass house, and escape. And that's kind of her whole mindset in the book. Like, she could stay in this reality and live the happy, loving life with her husband and children that she's always wanted. Or, she could take that stone and, experience what true reality is like. And that's why it's so interesting to me, is like, this is like a really real situation. And it's not just women. I'd say it's mostly women, but it's women and men. And, I think it's relevant. Like she was like oppressed by someone that she loved, and it's a common thing. And yeah. And I also think it would translate very easily to screen, which is also why I like it. I'm very much a screenwriter. I've written 3 books, but my writing is very much adept to the screen. It's very punchy. It's really fast. I don't really linger on plot beats for too long. It moves like a movie. It's very fast. People have even read this in like 2 hours. That's like the amount of time someone would take to sit down and watch a movie. So the ultimate goal for this is definitely to, adapt it into a film.
Do you ever worry, like, you being such a vocal spokesperson about this fucked up story, that someone from the damn Illuminati is going to come and like slit your throat at night?
I hope they do. Well, maybe not slit my throat, but I hope that I get a bit of
I'm not even being facetious. Do you understand what I mean, though?
Connor, my entire life, I have always wanted to be a private detective, right? I've always wanted to be a private detective because it's cool as shit. No, I love movies with like private detectives and all that sort of stuff. I'm a movie kid. Like, I've always grown up being like a little bit of like a dreamer and like a thinker and all that sort of stuff. And when this story, I first started writing it and I realized like how risky it was, like with all of these lawsuits, it like kind of jacked me up. I was like, I kind of hope that somebody, gives me a call and says, hey, like, we want to talk to you about this book, because that's the real shit that actually makes a difference. If nobody was, calling me about this, if this book had no risk or liability involved, who the fuck would want to read it? Because it's just another story at the end of the day. This is a story filled with risk, filled with liability, not just for me, but for the woman involved, for the other characters involved. And you know what? The villain, the antagonist of the story, the husband, he got away with it. Like, he's still out there. I hope he picks up this book. I hope he reads it, and I hope that I hear from someone. Now, in terms of like actual liability for me, names, dates, and places have been changed. It's technically fiction. I can't get in trouble with this whatsoever. But that being said, it doesn't mean that the actual people involved, couldn't read it and maybe pick up on some things and be like, wow, somebody's outed me. This is the way people really feel about what I did. And I kind of hope that happens.
How do you make the real life protagonist aware of this? Because I feel like that would elicit the response you want, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, what do you mean exactly by that? As
the dude who the book's about, how do you get this in front of his eyes?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's going to be difficult, but the best way to get it in front of his eyes is to spread the word. Like, it's just to get more people to read it, more people talking about it. I think this story is definitely, it's definitely more appealing to young women, I would say, than to young men. I think women would really empathize with this character because at the end of the day, she went into this relationship thinking that she had found the love of her life, and turns out he was just a sociopath and he was just manipulating her for 30 years. And I'm not saying that's something that's going to happen to every single person in the world, but it definitely happens to a lot of people. I think, word will spread because of the relatability. And then ultimately, I kind of hope that it gets so big that he simply can't ignore it.
What were the hallmark traits in what she explained to you of his sociopathic characteristics? What made him a sociopath?
It's a great question. Yeah, and
because people use that term so loosely.
Yeah. So there is like kind of an anecdote behind it that I think should answer the question perfectly. Is essentially when this was all happening, when she was working with the FBI against her husband without him realizing. She was also seeing a therapist, and she was really unsure about, and this part isn't in the book, but she was really unsure about how she felt, and she was really unsure about, whether she was doing the right thing or not. And so she started seeing a therapist, and she started explaining to her how, the husband, first of all, was never around, and when he was around, he would, kind of criticize her for the way that they were like raising their children, and everything that she was explaining to this therapist ultimately made the therapist stop her and go, I think your husband has narcissistic personality disorder, which essentially is the same thing as being a sociopath. And from there, the protagonist, it was kind of like a bug that was planted in her mind. She started to do her own research on it, and then she noticed that there were a lot of similarities between the way her husband acted and to what the kind of like definition of what this condition like actually, or this disorder is. And so she decided to take him to a therapist, not the same one, and they diagnosed him on the spot. Turns out you're not supposed to do that. And I actually am not sure why.
You're not supposed to do what?
You're not supposed to tell someone with narcissistic personality disorder that they have narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not 100% sure why. This is kind of, I guess, it's something that I wouldn't feel 100% confident like explaining. However, the way I interpreted it was that this person was essentially saying that, this guy, like, he can't really feel feelings. He can't really emote for people, even the ones that are closest to him. And the way that he kind of gets his kicks and the way that he kind of, energizes himself is through those loved ones. So when he's feeling, like down, or when he is, not in a good headspace, like he sucks the life out of his family, the ones closest to him, to kind of get to where he needs to be. Now, I know that is a little vague, but in terms of like the things that he would do to his wife, like he would cheat on her ruthlessly, and then when she was like coming close to finding out, he would like gaslight the fuck out of her and basically like say that she was the problem and that she's crazy and all that sort of stuff. He would, do even more terrible things. Like he would never hit her, but he would like emotionally abuse her. And like if he got really, really mad, he would like stand in front of her and he would like swing his hand and like stop it like an inch from her face. And because like it's kind of the same thing as hitting her, like all the fear is still there, but the bruise isn't there. So she couldn't go and say, oh, my husband's hitting me, because, people were always coming up to her being like, oh my God, your husband is so in love with you. He always talks about you. Like he always talks about how great you are. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, he's torturing the shit out of her.
Jesus. Fuck.
Yeah.
Now, this is somewhat irrelevant, but are you familiar with his upbringing and his backstory?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, because I asked that, it's like, is a narcissist developed over time, or are you born with those traits?
So the research that I did and the kind of story that I got from our protagonist, from his wife, was that it usually develops in the ages of like 3 to 5. So you're not really born with it, but you kind of are. Like it's developed before you're like 5 years old. Now, as for his upbringing, I don't know the ins and outs, but there is a chapter in the book which I would say is the most vulgar chapter. The parts that I do know about his upbringing are pretty grim. He was born into a household with, several sisters, no brothers. He was the only boy. His parents like cheated on each other ruthlessly, and they would like bring their partners home. I believe there were like they would throw like sex parties, and like when he was like 10 years old, he would like walk in from school or walk in from like practice, and there'd be, all these like 40, 50-year-old people just, getting ready to like, bang in his house. Like some guy was going to be banging his mom like 15 minutes after he got home from soccer practice, and he was going to be in the next room and he'd have to hear it. And that's kind of the way he grew up. That being said, like I didn't interview him. I wasn't able to interview him. I don't know if, there's more to it or less to it, but that is the kind of story that was told to me, and that was kind of the justifying reason behind him being the way that he is. That being said, those were his younger years, his teenage years, I'm sure, were filled with kind of a lot of both positive and negative development that led to him doing these things that he did in his like mid to late 20s.
It's fucked up, but does that make you empathize with him at all?
You should empathize with him. Yeah, one thing in writing is that you can't judge your characters. You can't judge your villain, you can't judge your hero, because they're characters, you know, they're characters, and in a way they're real people. Obviously this is based on a true story, these are real people. But if you're judging your characters, it's just gonna come off like a cartoon. Like it's gonna be just like blaringly obvious that this guy is evil. In the book, he's got duplicity. Like he's got two sides to him. He's got the side that he shows his wife and the public, and then he's got his wife in public, and then he's got the side that he shows behind closed doors. And yeah, of course you have to empathize with him, but that doesn't mean he's not a piece of shit. You know, you can empathize with someone and totally understand where they're coming from, but their actions, you know, you can't justify them with that kind of reasoning.
So what is his relationship with the kids now? Are the kids aware of this?
The kids are aware of this. At present day, I do not know what his relationship is like with the kids, but without kind of giving too much away, he's still out there. Like he's still out there. He's still teaching. Not in the United States, but he's still out there and he's still teaching.
Oh, he fled.
Oh yeah.
So when it started getting hot, he dipped.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd he go?
So I can't say the exact
Give us the region.
country. South America.
Okay.
Yeah, he's in South America, and yeah, he's still out there. He completely got away with it.
That is wild.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah, and I'm not giving away like the ending by any means. The book isn't about the ending. It's about the like the journey to the end and how it and how his actions affected everyone around him and the people around him that loved him, particularly his wife.
Now,
And,
were the kids aware that you were interviewing their mom?
No.
So the mom made this completely private to her family.
Yes. Yeah, and then several months in, she did tell them.
And has she like marketed the book at all now that it's out?
No. But there is a reason behind that. There's still a lot of stuff going on with her that she isn't able to quite yet. And frankly, I am giving her all the time in the world that she needs. This is an incredibly hard book for her to read. Never mind handing the copy to someone out there. So I'm giving her all the time in the world that she needs. Like even if she if she's reading it and she comes across something and she's like, oh, I'm worried that I'm worried that somebody is going to know this is me or whatever, I'll listen to it, and if she's really worried about it, like I will go in and change it. It's very easy to like change the document because Amazon does like print on demand, so it's really easy to change it. It takes like a day, maybe 2 days. So I'm very close with this woman. I will do like whatever I can to make sure that she's fully comfortable in this process. But
were you letting her proofread it?
Yeah, like more so just like to see what I wrote. I think she was just interested to see like how the story would kind of like move from like point A to point B to point C, because when we spoke it was all just kind of like all over the place, and like we jumped from like 1985 to like 2005 and then to 2015, and it was all over the place. So I think she's just more so interested in seeing how the story goes from like start to finish.
And what has her response been? Did she like it?
Yeah, she likes it. Yeah, it's really really insanely hard thing for her to read. But she does like it, which is good, which obviously I'm happy about.
Now, next steps, what would you like to do with the book?
My next steps for the book is, my next step is to find a large publisher. I'm aiming just really, really high with this one. And I want to find a large publisher, and I want to do like a, two birds, one stone kind of thing. I want to sell the film rights to this. I know when the woman and I first spoke about this book, she was more so interested in the movie. She was very interested in the fact that a book was being written about it, but, she wants this to be a movie. I want this to be a movie. So when I say that my next step is to find like a high level publisher, it kind of is, that's just, the avenue that I would like to go down. I'd like to be taken really seriously as a writer. But ultimately, I think this would make a fantastic movie or like a mini series or something, and that's ultimately where I would like for this to go.
Dreamcast, who's the protagonist played by?
That's such a great question.
Well, how old is she in the book?
In the book, she will be in her like 40s, like late 40s, like early 50s, perhaps. And I think
Amy Adams?
no. Well, so I
too
would have said Amy Adams, but I think it's a little too close to Sharp Objects. Like to kind of like the vibe of Sharp Objects, which have you ever seen that miniseries? It's really good, but it's like the vibe is really similar. Like it's like kind of like eerie and like sinister,
And you
like,
think it'd be
like,
redundant to cast?
yeah, and like suburban and like behind closed doors. Like I think it'd be a little redundant. I could see someone like kind of like her though, like let's see, like I don't know, just watch like Tar. So Kate Blanchett, I think, could be like a pretty awesome protagonist. I think she would kill us. And as for the antagonist, I think you got to get someone with like a strong jaw, like John Hamm or something, like a guy who, when people see him, like they're drawn to him, like they're because the antagonist, like people are really drawn to him. Like
He's charismatic,
really handsome guy, like total sociopath. But like most sociopaths kind of are like that to kind of like mask who they really are. And I think John Hamm could do a killer job with that.
This whole time you've been describing the book, I've been thinking Javier Bardem.
Javier Bardem would be incredible.
You feel me on that one, Liam?
Yeah.
Is he Argentinian, Javier Bardem? He's Spanish.
Spanish.
Okay.
Yeah, he would be incredible. But he's already played like the greatest villain in movie history.
What, No Country for Old Men?
Yeah, like he's already done it. I would like to give the role to, someone who I think like could move into it quite well. I think John Hamm could like excel in something like that. But that being said,
Maybe Jonah Hill.
Jonah Hill.
Wrong place, wrong time. Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
Back to being serious. Sorry.
But yeah, no, I mean, apart from that, like, I haven't like necessarily thought about casting, because when I write, I think about like obviously what the characters look like, and obviously I relate that to people that I know, and usually those are actors or actresses. But with this, like, I knew what everyone looked like. I knew, for the most part, how everyone acted. I knew their like mannerisms. So the characters in this book are like totally based on like the real people.
Now, in most stories like this, most quote unquote sociopaths have a group that enables them. Did he have anyone who was working for him that kind of let him do this? Like, I'm relating this to the whole like Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky thing.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's a great question, because he absolutely did. And so the interesting thing was, is like they enabled him, but they didn't know to the full extent of what he was doing. So nobody knew to the full extent of what he was doing with these girls. But there were like, there were red flags like here and there. There were warning signs here and there. Like people in, like the secretary's office that worked under him when he was the headmaster, swept a lot of stuff under the rug. The kind of board of trustees of the school swept everything under the rug. Like that guy, like when he actually got in trouble, like when he got outed, he didn't get fully outed. Like he didn't get outed by like the Boston Globe or like Spotlight. Like his name has never been in a Spotlight article, which is really interesting because they didn't have the full evidence to do so. But when they were like this close, and word was starting to like get out there, it was like even in some local papers, it was the board of trustees at the school that helped him get out, that helped him get away with it.
Normally the board of trustees are like alumni or like parents of some of the students. Is that who it was?
Exactly. Yeah, they mostly were, I don't know if they were like parents of students, but they were mostly like alumni. And if they weren't alumni of this school in particular, they were alumni of like other prestigious boarding schools in New England. So that's why it's kind of like an old boys club, because like everything is interconnected.
Now, when you were writing the book, I'm sure the wife's story was very compelling and believable, but you must have vetted your sources somehow, right?
Absolutely.
Because I'm sure over the course of 20 years of abuse, some of the details get a little fucking mixed up.
Absolutely. And I knew that was going to be a factor. And I also knew that I could only get so much access to the real true story of this true story, and then also, the overarching story of like the spotlight investigation that they did into like all of the boarding schools. So the way I wrote the book was 100% through the protagonist's eyes, through the woman's eyes. In doing so, she becomes an unreliable narrator, which essentially means that what she sees might not actually be what is reality, but what's important to the reader is the way that she interprets it. And it moves the story from point A to point B because she discovers certain things throughout the story. Like each chapter, she discovers at least one thing about her husband or herself, or the boarding school. And it's up to both her, and in doing so, it's up to the reader to decide whether to believe it or not. So everything in this book is what was told to me by her, and what was told to her was, everything that she knows was told to her by her husband, the FBI spotlight team at the Boston Globe, or members of faculty from the boarding school. So there's so much bullshit that's going to be involved, but I think that's why the story works so well, because there is no happy ending. Like, this is a real, true, like, actual story. Like, a happy ending, yeah, like you need the truth to come out at a certain point in the book. But I think the nice thing about this story is like the reader has to make up their mind for themselves. Like, they have to figure out what to believe, what not to believe, because the protagonist is going to be doing that as well. So that's why it's so easy to empathize with the character, because you are literally put into her shoes, and you have to decide, like if all of this is bullshit, or if she's actually, being oppressed for the last 30 years, and if she should take that stone and break out of this glass house.
When she started, I don't want to reveal too much about the book, but when she started to get tipped off that this activity was happening, how did she confront her husband?
That's a great question. And the actual truth is different than what's in the book. So I'm going to talk about what's in the book, because it is just like a little bit more cinematic, and it's a little more cinematic, a little more dramatic. But in the book, she was having a lot of internal conflict with herself. Like, she was really fighting herself. She didn't know whether she should confront her husband or not. She hadn't quite found all of the evidence that she needed to find. She had spoken with one of the victims, and this victim was someone that was very much kind of like a little flirt in high school, and would like always flirt with the husband, like, while he was a teacher. So she was always just kind of like, this girl could just be like a little crazy, a little jealous, and maybe nothing actually happened, or everything that she's saying could have actually happened, and this could be the truth. So she one day, she comes home, and they have a great night, with the family. It's like her husband, the daughters, like they have a fantastic night. They all cook like pizzas or something, and they have like a movie night. And then she discovers that the husband had been cheating on her with someone that she knew. And that's when she decided to confront him and tell him that she's been working with the FBI.
So the catalyst was the fact that her feelings were hurt that she was being cheated on.
Yes.
And it wasn't the fact that she had all this outstanding possible evidence that her husband was getting with little girls.
No. Well, I wouldn't say that. It was more so like the evidence that he was cheating on her was there. And that was like the final domino. It wasn't necessarily like all of this stuff like didn't bother her or whatever. And then like this, something like personal to her bothered her. Yeah, but it was kind of like the last domino, and it was like the millionth paper cut. You know what I mean? It was like, that is like when she started bleeding, like when she found out that her husband like didn't even like truly love her, because he had been cheating on her. Then that was like the final paper cut.
So peel back. So she confronted him?
Yeah, she confronted him after she found out that he had been cheating on her. She confronted him about the investigation and said, "This is what I've been doing. Like, is this fucking true?"
Did she scan his face when she brought it up to him?
Yeah, and then he, being the excellent, like, sociopathic actor that he is, denied it until she revealed that in like a later chapter, like reveals that, she gets a piece of information that is, fact, like, he did these things, and then she confronts him again, and that's when he admits to her that he did do all those things.
He admitted it.
Yeah, he admitted it only to her.
Really?
Yeah.
And what was that like for her? Did she describe it? That must have
turned
her whole world on her head.
Yeah, it did. And she just like, what a traumatic like period of her life. she just, how could it not be? Like, she just pure trauma, like so much anger, so much denial. Like, she went through all the stages, I'm sure. And I personally couldn't even imagine. I mean, words can only do it so much justice. Like, obviously she was fucking pissed. And she, blamed herself and this and that and whatever. But, I would imagine that it was very much like just like a blurry chaos, and she kicked him out of the house. And, yeah, and then I don't want to like reveal any more about anything after that, because it does, like, in the story, like, it really picks up and it gets really interesting, how it kind of like all ends. But
Well, imagine that happening and then you realizing how deep into their marriage was this?
this is like 30 years in.
Imagine being like, wow, I've been getting conned my entire life.
Yeah.
Like she's running back every single good memory she had with this dude, being like, wow, he was not that.
Exactly, and that's why the book is written in kind of like past and present. So some chapters will be in the past, some will be present day, and the purpose of that is so that those past chapters, it's almost like she's looking back on a memory and trying to like decipher, what actually was like happening at that time.
Now, I don't want this to seem condescending whatsoever, and I know you have a relationship with the woman, so if I come across this way, I apologize, but did she seem clueless?
No, she did not, and I think so how I would describe her character as like a person, just in real life, is she is like the most trusting, loving person that I think I've ever met or ever had like the pleasure of speaking with. The reason why I say that is that she's just like so pure as a person. Like, she really, really is. Like, she's so pure as a person. She just like never, like, she doesn't even bash this guy. Like, when I was interviewing her, she did not say like a bad word about him that wasn't like fact in her eyes. Like, she literally just told me like what happened. She wasn't like, this guy's a piece of shit, like he fled the country, like he's a fucker. Like, she didn't say anything like that. Like, she is a lovely person, like pure. She hold like the only kind of like negative thoughts that she holds about this guy is exactly like you said. Like, he fucking conned her for 30 years, like, and still she's doing okay. Like, still she is able to take care of her daughters. Still she is able to try get back into new relationships. Like, I have a lot of respect for this woman. Like, she absolutely, like, just baffles me in how she is like just going about life, because it's just so pure. But that being said, 30 years is a long time. 30 years is a long time. I think she loved him so much that even when she did see red flags, she forced herself to be clueless. She forced herself to become ignorant, because she probably just didn't realize the weight of what was happening. And she said, you know what, like, I love this guy so much, I'm willing to sweep this under the rug. Like, and I'll give you an example. When they were younger, like in their 20s or maybe early 30s, she suspected of him like cheating on her with just some woman that like they both knew. And he definitely was like, he cheated on her like a shitload, like a ton.
He's a priest, right?
No, he wasn't a priest, he was a headmaster.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, over 30 years, like, she confronted him at the end of the marriage. She confronted him, and I think he revealed that he had slept with like X number of women, or this woman and that woman and this woman. And
What was the number?
I don't know the number. That's but that's what happened. Like, she kind of just like exploded and was like, oh well, what about this girl? What about this girl? Like, did you fuck her too? And he was like, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. So she had her suspicions, but she loved him so much and just always wanted like a real family, because like her upbringing wasn't great either. Like, she grew up in like a Boston Irish like home in like a not great part of the city with like
Where?
10
Is she
like
in Southie?
no, not Southie, like, and all she ever wanted her entire life was just like a loving, like, tight family. She wanted a husband that was good with kids. Like, she wanted the children, like, she wanted to be the mom. And then she thought she got it, and then turns out it was all just like a huge lie.
Is she super religious?
No.
She's not.
No.
And the husband was?
No, neither.
It was a Catholic school.
Yeah, Catholic school, but neither were super religious.
I asked that because I wonder if she questioned her faith after all this went down, but she
Sure, she
wasn't.
did. Yeah, I know that she's not insanely religious. I think she definitely was raised Catholic. She definitely was raised going to church every Sunday. That being said, I don't think she kind of like maintained that faith like throughout her whole life. But I really wouldn't be surprised if like when all this was happening, like how could she not? Like, unless she was just like full blown atheist, which I don't think she is. Like, how could she not kind of like lie awake in bed being like, why is this happening to me? Like, all I ever wanted was just like a family, and now like it's my family that is destroying me. It's kind of ironic. Like,
So why didn't the Boston Globe release anything on this?
didn't have enough evidence. Yeah.
But how long were they building a case for?
So they were building a case for a couple years. So it was like the FBI and the Boston Globe over the course of like 2 to 3 years were building their own individual cases. Spotlight team were building like a big, massive case against like all of the boarding schools that were doing it. The FBI were kind of more so like fine tuning or like focused in on like individual people. And the reason why this person and this school, for the most part, was not named in like any of their major investigations was because they actually paid off the victims. To my knowledge, they at least paid off a couple of them, and they really kind of did what they could to sweep it under the rug. Now, I will follow up in saying that I wasn't able to kind of investigate that side of things. It was really difficult, and I also thought that it didn't really serve much purpose to the woman's part of the story, which I wanted this to be 100% about her and not so much about the overarching like scandals that were happening. So I'm sure there were other reasons why it wasn't included, but it definitely was a result of like not enough evidence because these girls were kind of ultimately either paid off or scared off not to talk.
So rewinding a little bit. So your mom meets this woman in the grocery store, and how long do they talk for? Just like a little bit?
Nah, my mom can talk. My dad always says my mom can talk for Ireland because she loves to talk. Like, she is an absolutely lovely woman. I love my mom so much,
It's
but
genetic.
like, yeah, yeah, I love my mom so much, but like if you're with her in a grocery shop and she sees one of her friends, like you're gonna be there for half an hour.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, so like, cool, they talked for a little bit, but then you probably had no concept that the story was this deep.
No, Jesus, not at all. No, my ma just came home and she's like, "You have to hear this story," and we kind of sat down and she told me like the cliff notes. She gave me like the overarching details of the story. She told me like, yeah, this guy, like, he was the headmaster of boarding school, and he was caught for. I think at the time my mom thought that he didn't get away with it, and he was, because I think back then he was still might have still been like in the country. But she came back and she was like, this guy, like, he did this and he did that, and like there's boarding schools involved, and like this woman, and like he cheated on her with like this woman who like who my mom's friend knew, and it was all like it was all just kind of like all over the place and just really like high level, just like little bullet points. But for whatever reason, it just really stuck, and I was like, wow, that sounds really interesting. And then just never forgot about it. Like, finished my second book, and then I was looking for ways to write a new book, and I thought about this story. Just decided to reach out to her, and my first meeting with her, I kind of got her to give me the overview of the entire story. And once she did that, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna write this book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're about 50 minutes in. I want you to just really evaluate. And Liam, you could probably be a good judge of character here, but is there anything else you want me to ask so you can get this covered?
Liam,
I know you got plenty of great stuff, though.
I think we got a lot of stuff. Oh, I would like to. So can you ask me like what other? Oh no, I already did that. Yeah, I think
It
what
felt
is your?
organic kill.
It did feel good. Maybe just because I would like to talk about Aurelia for a couple minutes, or well,
What is Aurelia?
I just want to talk about maybe something to do with like screenwriting. Like, what am I work? Yeah. Yeah, like, yeah.
Do you want this to be professional? Can Liam come up here and ask it?
No, I wanted to get Liam
Okay, sick.
up here. Do you wanna come in?
No, let's swap spots. Let's swap spots. Get in here, man. Get in. Come on. Yeah, let's get you on the Hollywood mic, brethren. Come on. It's all
it's
good.
fine.
It's all good, Irish stallions.
Papercuts is already done. This is.
Okay.
We'll just do one thing. Oh yeah.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Extremely
Oh, cool. Thank you.
interesting. I love it.
Thanks very much. How's that? Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Lovely. We're all good? Cool. Well, we've
Okay,
got
so-
Liam on the mic now.
Yeah, so I'm replacing Conor. I'm just off the boat. I'm Cillian's friend from Ireland, and I have a writing history with Cillian. Obviously, I've read the book. It was a brilliant book, a great way to portray the story. It's interesting to hear him talking about that, because I obviously knew a lot of the background. You told me a bit about it, but I didn't really know to what extent she was attached to the project and how much she poured out into you. So I think it's really impressive that you were able to do her story justice without, absolving anyone of any sort of responsibilities or anything like that. So
Cool.
yeah,
Thank you. Yeah. And Liam and I have been Liam and I have been writing for like 8 years or something now.
yeah, it's been about 8. We were
Maybe
about
9 years.
maybe 17 or 18 when we started. 16 or 17 when we started in school.
Yeah. It's been a long time.
yeah.
So Liam is usually like the first person that I ever send my book to, ever send anything to. I actually thought it was really funny. So like Liam is probably you're probably like one of the best writers I've like our age that I've ever had like the pleasure of reading.
Say the same, mate.
And like we work really well together, and it was funny. I like my first 2 books, Liam was like the first person to read them, and he after he would read the first and the second one, he was like, oh yeah, like this, it's pretty good, you should maybe think about doing this or doing that. And then after he read this one, the reason why I knew it was kind of going to be good was like, he goes, Jesus, this is actually fucking pretty good. he is so for him to say like that he thought it was good, like that was kind of like the first thing that like gave me confidence about putting the book out there. So
yeah, not to shit on any of your work or anything in the past. I've enjoyed all your writing, but I particularly noticed with this book how your writing's improved over the years, and how you have maybe reflected on some of the other stuff that you have put out there and said, how can I improve that? And I think all that really hard work and serious research in this piece in particular is really, really evident when you read it, and you can get that from the opening couple of chapters. Like right away, what I found interesting reading the book, I know you spoke a little bit about the protagonist's inner conflict and the sort of turmoil she's going through, but it's really evident early on that she's juggling between sort of evidence that's presented to her or things that are really in her face that should be red flags, and trying to talk herself down, trying to talk herself out of that, trying to avoid any sort of confrontation and argument, and her character arc then builds really well from that. So the groundwork and everything up was really, really impressive. Yeah.
cool. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And well, Liam and I are also working on something together at the moment as well. We've been manifesting on this for like 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
I would say. I'll
Yeah.
let Liam kind of give the spiel, but this is something that like we are, just us two, like pre-pandemic, we're really hoping to write and then ultimately shoot or do something with it. So now we're both living in LA. Liam moved here 3 weeks ago, and it's probably the most exciting thing that's happened to us
in the last
years.
couple of years.
Yeah,
Anyway, that's
so
for sure. Yeah.
I'll let
yeah.
Liam give like the spiel of her idea.
Well, I don't exactly have like an elevator pitch prepared, but me and Cillian would have a deep interest, particularly in sort of 1970s era crime films, whether they're American films or whether they're French, Italian, you know. That's kind of the genre that we've always been interested in. So we've kind of looked at how can you make that style of film in a modern setting. And that's something that we've ruminated over multiple scripts that we've written together over the years, something that we've tried to capture. With this particular idea, how we kind of set that up is we have an Irish character, and for one reason or another, which is explained early on, that character has to flee Ireland, and they happen to land themselves in LA, not dissimilar to our own background, and they of course become a sort of fish out of water character. And this is all happening in the backdrop of a missing mob boss's daughter and a serial killer on the loose, and how this person has to sort of figure out the ropes in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. If Quentin Tarantino were Irish, he probably would have written this.
He probably
story.
would have written this already, yeah. So thankfully he wasn't.
Yeah. That's next on the docket for us, I would say. And
Yeah,
that's the
and
biggest focus.
obviously, like, that's when you say the idea out there and you talk about it, you realize, you know, that's going to be a big project to undertake. So at the moment, obviously, the idea would be coming up with one part of the script, whether it's a scene or whether it's a manufactured scene, to capture the sort of aesthetic, the themes, the motif, and make something ourselves while we're out here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, you'll be hearing from us in the next few
Hopefully-
months. I
hopefully
would say
very
a little bit
soon,
more
yeah,
on that.
hopefully very
Yeah,
soon.
definitely want to pursue us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Think. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Connor, yeah.
Yeah, I think
I'm about ready to go.
Yeah, we're all good.
Oh, it was great. Nice experience. They make them the same as they do at home, so it wasn't too.
Good work, Brett. Okay. Kill, two things you didn't discuss. Liam, thank you. The seat is it's like an inferno now. It's quite warm. Where to get the book?
Cool.
Boom. Tell them.
So you can get the book on Amazon. Amazon is the only place to get it currently. If you just search "Death by a Million Papercuts," it'll pop right up. And yeah, I'm hoping to get it into like a few other places in the near future. But for right now, Amazon.com.
Hold it up. Just give that marquee shot. This camera over here.
This camera.
Yep.
There we go.
There we go. Death by a Million Papercuts. Amazon.
Amazon.
A true story.
Yep.
I don't even felt a little nervous making jokes this whole time because it was so dark and grim. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I'm kind of regretting that Jonah Hill joke, I'll be honest with you.
We can cut that out.
Yeah, no, it's all right. No, you can keep it, whatever. Okay, now let me just give the classic podcast wrap up. Do you remember how we do that?
Oh,
Now, listen, this is going to be on our podcast page. So, guys, if you are listening to this, I know I've been doing the Snake Pit updates quite often from the apartment. Go get Cillian's book. Cillian helps produce pretty much everything with us out here. It's me and him pulling all the fucking events together. He's operating everything. He's running the team. He's a hustler. Clearly, he's passionate about this. And additionally, Cillian and I, and Liam, I don't know if you've seen the script yet, we will be producing and definitely shooting the next actual Golden Deer production this year. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping we shoot it by June.
I hope so too.
Did you see it yet? You saw the edits?
I did.
Great. Okay.
Yep.
Anyway, this is how we start and end the podcast. Hi, I'm Cillian Dunne, and this is my golden hour. Hi, I'm Cillian Dunne. That was my golden hour. Let me hype you up. You got to look into the camera, though. Slate towards the camera. Hold on.
All right.
Deep inside the snake pit. There's snakes everywhere. It's terrifying. But we're here. We're surviving. Sebastian, thank you. Liam, you're a great guy. Kill, take it away, brethren.
Hi, I'm Cillian Dunne, and this is my golden hour. Hi, I'm Cillian Dunne, and that was my golden hour.
Boom. Thank you. Corporate handshake. Good work, brethren.
Corporate handshake.
All right, Sebastian. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Sebastian.